Hey Regs, I just wanted to let y'all know that this episode's a little all over the place. I mean, you can kind of hear it in my voice right now. I'm recovering from being sick. I'm not doing my best, and the audio kind of kept fluctuating in volume, so I'm really sorry about that. Um, I'll streamline it by Friday whenever I'm bringing you my reviews. But I just wanted to let y'all know that this episode is kind of everywhere, so I apologize for that. Uh, we're getting back into the swing of things, but I hope that y'all enjoy it, and I hope y'all are excited for Kenobi. Let's go.
A desert planet with twin suns.
Why do I sense we've picked up another pathetic life form?
Use my knowledge. Much to learn. You still have.
Welcome back to Twin Sun Talks, folks. I'm your host, Jonah Liu. Thank you so much for listening. I'd just like to start this out by apologizing for how kind of chaotic the podcast has been recently, especially if you're a new listener. I know that I haven't quite had everything together, but last week I was on a summer conference retreat with student ministry that I'm a part of at my college, and then right after coming back, I had some sort of virus, and I've been down for the count for the last couple days. You could probably hear that I'm still a little stuffed up in the nose, but I really wanted to get y'all this episode as soon as possible, especially before Kenobi comes out. Because if you've seen the title, you know that this is my Kenobi prep episode. But I just wanted to open by saying very sorry, because I know that it's been very inconsistent. I was really late getting the YouTube video out for last week's ability to speak. Didn't do an episode this past Monday, which is very unusual for me. I think that might be the first weekly episode that I missed day of since I started, so which was over a year ago. So big apologies, but I'm getting it out now, and I know it's late, but I pushed it back to today because I wanted to be able to do it with 100% capacity, and I'm still at about 80, but that's okay. We're going to get it done. And I'm super excited for Kenobi and getting to discuss it with y'all. So here's what you need to know before watching Kenobi. Let's dive into visions.
To continue, we need one singular vision. My vision.
Alrighty, so basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with just a very streamlined and basic timeline of Kenobi as he exists within the canonical timeline. I'm not really going to go into too much about what he does in various shows and stuff. I'm going to stick mainly to the movies, and I might sprinkle in some details here and there. But that being said, I did a full profile of Obi-Wan back in episode 55 of this podcast, so I think it was my first or second character profile, second, I think. So if you want a more in-depth look at Kenobi as a character, then go back and listen to that. I would highly recommend that. But if not, his basic timeline is as follows. Obi-Wan Kenobi was apprenticed to Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn sometime before the events of The Phantom Menace, which is chronologically the first Star Wars movie. Qui-Gon was then killed during an altercation with Darth Maul on Naboo. And Maul was defeated by Kenobi. Notice I didn't say killed, but he was in fact defeated. And then Obi-Wan took on Anakin Skywalker as his apprentice to accommodate the dying wish of Qui-Gon, despite the Jedi Council's trepidations about Skywalker as a potential pupil, because they figured he was too old, he had too many connections to the outside world, including his mother. But Obi-Wan resolved to train him anyways, and the Council obliged. And then there are 10 years between The Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones, which we're actually getting a book which kind of fills in those. Well, actually, okay, disclaimer. This book that we're getting in the future, near future, it's called Brotherhood. It either takes place during that 10-year gap between The Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones, or it takes place during the early days of the Clone Wars. I think now that I'm saying it, it might take place during the early days of the Clone Wars, but either way, it kind of fills in a cool little early gap of Anakin and Obi-Wan's relationship that we don't get to see in too many forms of media, including the Clone Wars, because it's a little further down the line in their relationship. But moving on to his timeline in Attack of the Clones, he actually discovers a secret clone army being developed on the backwater world of Camino. Um, and he discovers this while investigating one of the assassins who is trying to kill Senator Padme Amidala, named Jango Fett, and he actually tracks Jango to the desert planet of Geonosis, where he is captured and imprisoned. He is then put into an arena and forced to fight to the death with these giant creatures alongside Anakin and Padme, who came to try to rescue him. And they're ultimately rescued by the clone army alongside a lot of Jedi who end up dying to try to protect them and also assassinate Count Dooku, or at least bring him to justice. He Obi-Wan then goes on to battle Count Dooku alongside Anakin and lose, having to be rescued by Master Yoda. And after all these events of the first Battle of Geonosis, the genesis of the Clone Wars, Obi-Wan then takes Jedi Master Coleman Trevor's spot on the Jedi Council after Master Trevor was killed by Jango Fett. And you actually see this in the movie. He's the dinosaur-looking Jedi who jumps up onto the platform and has a clean cut at Dooku and then gets shot down by Jango. And during the Clone Wars, Obi-Wan actually fights in a lot of campaigns alongside Anakin, Ahsoka, and the 212th Attack Battalion, all these different people. And if you want to learn more about that, then you can go back and listen to episode 55, that character profile that I was talking about. I'm not going to go into too much detail about him right now, but it's really, really awesome. And if you haven't watched the Clone Wars, I would highly recommend it. If the length of the show is any issue for you, then I would recommend going back and listening to episodes 2 and 3 of this podcast, where I go through my roadmap through the Clone Wars, which helps kind of streamline the episodes, make sure you only watch the most important ones, or at least the most enjoyable ones, in my opinion. But with that said, at the beginning of Revenge of the Sith, we see Obi-Wan fighting once again alongside Anakin, his brother-in-arms, his former apprentice at this point. And they are tasked with rescuing Chancellor Palpatine from the clutches of General Grievous after he has been kidnapped from Coruscant during the Battle of Coruscant at the latter end of the Clone Wars. And he and Anakin are successful after an altercation with Count Dooku, where Anakin actually ends up killing Dooku. And he, after all that, goes to Utapau to confront General Grievous, because all of the Separatist leaders have congregated on Utapau, and Grievous is really the last major military leader of the Confederacy of Independent Systems Army, which is the long way of saying the Separatist Alliance, the bad guys, quote unquote, in the Clone Wars. And Kenobi, who kind of has the most history with Grievous, is tasked with going after him, and he ultimately wins after saying his famous line, "Hello there." He is able to defeat Grievous by shooting him in his exposed organs with Grievous's own blaster, which is so uncivilized. Very shortly after that, he is shot down by his own troops while they're executing Order 66, but he does not die. He is presumed dead after falling a great height. But obviously he survives, and he is reunited with Yoda with the help of Senator Bail Organa, and he ends up going to Mustafar to confront Anakin, who is now Darth Vader, and they end up having a very long and emotional lightsaber duel, which ends in him chopping off Anakin's limbs and leaving him on a lava bank to die because he can't bring himself to actually deliver the killing blow himself, which allows Anakin to live and survive and become the Darth Vader that we all know and despise. And then after all that happens, Padme gives birth to twins and dies because of her sadness for the loss of Anakin to the dark side, But she tells Obi-Wan, as her dying breath, she knows that there is still good in him before she passes away. And Obi-Wan is then tasked with two things. He is tasked with finding, no, not finding. He is tasked with taking Luke, who is one of the twins that Padme birthed, to Tatooine to live with his family, who are Owen and Beru Lars. They are Anakin's step brother and step sister-in-law. And essentially, he is tasked with bringing Luke there and keeping watch over him, which is what we're going to be seeing in the Kenobi show. And then he is also tasked with special training, which will be communed to him via the Force by none other than Qui-Gon Jinn, who has discovered the secret to immortality but wasn't able to complete his training because of his untimely death. But Yoda tells him that he has been communing with him, and therefore he will also begin to train Obi-Wan. So, very interesting little tidbit. And as far as the canonical timeline goes, that is about the end of where we really need to be oriented going into Kenobi. So Kenobi takes place between any other canonical information about Obi-Wan that I can think of in any visual media, meaning TV shows or movies, and the end of Revenge of the Sith. So I would just like to say that this period that I'm stopping in right now to discuss this is where the Kenobi show is taking place. But I'm going to just briefly go through everything that happens afterwards. So this next bit is going to be a spoiler for Rebels, so if you don't want to listen, then close your ears for like 10 seconds. Obi-Wan has an altercation with Maul on Tatooine and kills him. Anyways, that's it. And I'm just going to pause for a little bit for people that haven't watched Rebels. But anyways, moving forward after that are just the events of A New Hope, which is basically when Obi-Wan answers the call to action from Princess Leia to aid the rebel cause right before the Battle of Yavin and sacrifices himself to save Luke and his friends, and ultimately passes into the Force after Vader strikes him down on the Death Star. And then moving forward, he just continues to provide wisdom as a Force ghost. And that's really about it as far as Obi-Wan's story goes. I'm sure I left a couple things out, but I think as far as the bare bones go, you kind of get the gist. I think most people know Obi-Wan's story at this point, but I felt it appropriate to go through it right before the show. As far as what to expect from the show itself, I really don't have too many thoughts because I really want to experience this show with y'all. I haven't been reading too many articles about theories. I really want to be surprised. I want to go into this very fresh, and I'm really, really excited about the show, but I have a couple just kind of general points. Obviously, we're going to get to see Obi-Wan's time between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope, which is very, very exciting. And just to give y'all a little bit of orientation timeline-wise, this is going to take place 10 years after Revenge of the Sith, which is 9 years before A New Hope. So a very natural middle point between the two movies, which is a really interesting time period because we kind of get to see the Empire being established. It's still in its earlier days, but it's not quite as early as, say, the Bad Batch, which was like literally the genesis. I think I've already said that, but like literally the very, very beginning. Whereas within the confines of this show, we're going to get to see it as a little bit more of a little bit more of a legitimate presence within the galaxy, which should be a really interesting perspective. We'll get to see, hopefully, Obi-Wan grappling with something like survivor's guilt, as well as the shame of Anakin's fall, because especially in the Legends book, Kenobi, I know that he blamed himself for a lot of the stuff that was happening in the galaxy because A, he wasn't strong enough to kill Anakin. B, he wasn't strong enough to keep Anakin from turning to the dark side, or wasn't able to see the signs that Anakin was so close to turning to the dark side. He wasn't able to do X, Y, and Z to save everything. He put all of that responsibility on himself. And I think that that would be a really interesting thing to see within this show. I think that we'll also likely see a confrontation between Vader and Kenobi, whether that's in a dream or in real life. I think that the dialogue that Vader has in um, episode 4 really leaves a lot open to interpretation, where he doesn't actually say the last time that he and Kenobi met. He kind of trails off each time he begins to talk about it. So I think that as long as it doesn't in any way detract from the emotional elements that we see in episode 4, then I'm all for something like that. I think that that would be really, really awesome. And then lastly, I've kind of already spoken to this, but we get to see the Inquisitors and Empire operate when they have more solidified power within the galaxy. Kind of like that time between Rebels and Bad Batch when they're first starting, or when it's pretty much like they've always been there. Which I think establishing and developing Imperial rule is a really interesting thing that a lot of Star Wars hasn't done too much with. And I think that that's a really, really interesting thing to flesh out, and I'm really looking forward to see what they do with that in this show. So the last thing I'm going to go through are just some characters that I think would be important to know within the confines of the Kenobi show. And I've kind of broken them into different categories. So this first chunk that I'm going to do are people that I know for sure are going to be in this show based on promotional material or interviews that have been done or anything like that. So the first two, which I have separately, but I think I can talk about together, are Anakin Skywalker and Darth Vader. So Anakin was Obi-Wan's Padawan turned best friend during the prequel era, fell to the dark side due to Palpatine's manipulation, and became Darth Vader. And now Darth Vader is obviously the main antagonist of the original trilogy, and I don't think I need to say too much about either of them because I think they're pretty well understood characters within the Star Wars mythos. But an important thing to note about Vader is that he really only has two main motivations, and that is to A, bring Padme back to life, which you get a lot of lore about in comics and stuff like that, and also to kill Kenobi, most specifically, but also just Jedi in general. He really wants to kill Jedi because he blames them for his downfall as well as Padme's death, because if he had been afforded the resources necessary to know how to save her life, then maybe he would have been able to, but he does in fact blame the Jedi for that. Next up, we have Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru. We meet them for the first time in Attack the Clones. They are the stepbrother and stepsister-in-law to Anakin after Owen's father married Anakin's mother. And they are moisture farmers on the planet of Tatooine. They are Luke's guardians, and they are who Obi-Wan takes Luke to after Revenge of the Sith. And they are acting as, like I said, Luke's parents, essentially, in this movie. Luke's about 10 years old, and I might as well lump Luke into this, too, because I don't think Luke's going to have too much to do, but he's going to be a little boy. And Owen, in particular, is extremely, extremely protective of Luke. Basically seeing Ben, or Obi-Wan is likely going to be going as Ben Kenobi, which interesting little tidbit. Actually, I'll save that for a more. Never mind. I'll save that for a more. Stay tuned if you want to know that tidbit. But Uncle Owen essentially sees Ben / Obi-Wan as a threat to Luke and thinks that Obi-Wan should stay as far away from him as possible, which should be an interesting point of contention within this show. Luke Skywalker is, like I said, he's going to be 10 years old. I don't think he's going to play a super huge role narratively other than like motivation for Obi-Wan. And then the Inquisitors. I did a whole episode about the Inquisitors back in episode, I think it was 78 of this podcast. And what they essentially were they were agents of the dark side who worked under Vader to hunt and kill Jedi who survived Order 66. And we got a lot of lore about them in things like Jedi Fallen Order and Star Wars Rebels. They're very, very interesting. And I'm really excited to get to see them in live action. I think that that's going to be a really, really cool thing. And I just checked. It is, in fact, episode 78. So if you want to learn more about the Inquisitors, go ahead and look at that. But if you want to know the Inquisitors that I know for sure are going to be in the show. One, the Grand Inquisitor, who's kind of the head honcho. He's a Powin who has like a pale face, kind of a round, bald head. Super cool. The fifth brother, who's an unknown species, very brutish, very brutal. The third sister, whose name is Reva, who seems to be kind of the crux main character type individual of the Inquisitors. Should be interesting. I don't know too much about her. And then the fourth sister, who we've kind of seen the least of the ones that we've seen. They're also going to be accompanied by Purge Troopers, who are specialized troopers trained specially for hunting Jedi. Really interesting. We saw some of them in Jedi Fallen Order. Should be really, really cool to see them fleshed out a little bit more. That's about all that I have for the people that I know for sure are going to be in this show. Moving on to speculation. I think that it would be super, super interesting to see Commander Cody as an Imperial officer helping to hunt down Kenobi. I think that would add another layer of tension to the story, which I think would be super cool to see. Duchess Satine Crees is not someone who I think we're going to actually physically see, but I think we might hear of her. And for those of you who haven't watched the Clone Wars, Satine was someone who Kenobi was romantically involved with, and they kind of had a little thing going whenever he was still a Padawan. He and Qui-Gon were protecting her from Mandalorian terrorists, and then during the Clone Wars, he protects her once again from Mandalorian terrorists. She actually, spoiler alert, dies in his arms, which is super traumatic, super, super sad scene. And it's a large source of trauma for Kenobi. And so I think that it would be really interesting to see if they played off of that at all. Qui-Gon Jinn, I think, could come back as a Force ghost and commune with Obi-Wan. I think that it would be fantastic if Liam Neeson came back and played him. Fingers crossed. I think it would be really, really awesome. Bounty hunters. We see someone who resembles Forlom in the trailers, who was a protocol droid who went rogue, overrode his programming, and became a bounty hunter, who's often found with a bounty hunter named Zuckuss, who is a Gand bounty hunter, used to be a sort of wayfinder for his people before their religion kind of died out. Other people that I think we could see, people seem to think that they see someone like Cad Bane silhouetted in one of the trailers. I think that would be incredible to see that happen, but I don't think it's super likely. I think that they're probably going to stick with more original trilogy-style bounty hunters, sort of like Black Chrysanthemum, IG-88, Dengar, and Bosk, maybe even Boba Fett. But biggest thing is, I hope that they don't focus too much on the bounty hunters. I think it would be really cool to just have a lot of small cameos with not too much dialogue, because I don't want to pull focus away from Kenobi. That's the biggest thing with the show, is I don't want to pull focus away from Kenobi. But with all that said, I think that we could also see Bail and Leia Organa. I think that would be super interesting to see their perspective on everything that's going on, especially since Bail is one of the few people that knows for certain that Obi-Wan is still alive. And I know that there were rumors that Leia is going to be held hostage by the Inquisitors to kind of leverage Kenobi. Could be an interesting thing. I don't know how much weight that holds, but I felt it worth mentioning. And I'm just going to speed run a couple people that I think would be interesting if they showed up, but I don't think it's super likely. Cal Kestis, the protagonist from Jedi Fallen Order, Padawan who survived Order 66. Could be interesting. Do I think it's likely? No. Do I really want it to happen? No, because I think that would, once again, pull focus from Kenobi. Ahsoka Tano, same thing. Love her as a character, but she's getting her own show. I don't think we need to see her in this show. Bo-Katan Kryze, don't really see how that would happen. She is Satine's sister. We get to see her a little bit in Mando Season 2. Could be interesting. Don't think it's going to happen. Once again, would pull focus from Kenobi. Corky Kryze, supposedly Satine's nephew. There are a lot of theories going around saying that he is actually Kenobi's son with Satine, which would be wild. Because, I mean, if you look at the way that he's animated in the Clone Wars, he looks very, very similar to Kenobi. He's one of the only characters on Mandalore with red instead of blonde hair, which is big. I don't know. Could be an interesting thing, but once again, if we're only getting 6 episodes for this show, so I think that something as big as Kenobi having a biological son would be really huge. They would need really long episodes to flesh all that out. But hey, I think having Corky Crees show up in some Mandalorian armor would be sick. But that is kind of beside the point. Lastly is Darth Maul. I don't think Darth Maul is going to show up in this. It would be interesting to maybe see him hunting Kenobi, maybe have him as kind of a side character, but I don't think he's going to be super prominent. I think that the main focus, the main tension should be between Vader and Kenobi. I don't think that Maul has too much of a place in this narrative. But that's about all that I have. I know that this was both very fast and very slow. My brain is still kind of coming back to me. I've been very out of it recently, so I'm sorry if I kind of slurred in some places or was just kind of slow. But with that said, this wouldn't be a proper episode if I didn't leave you with just a little bit more. So the more that I hinted at earlier in this episode is that the reason that Obi-Wan goes by Ben is because that is kind of a little pet name or nickname that Satine used to call him. So that was like, and this is, I don't know if this is canon. This might be from the Legends Kenobi book, which is fantastic, and I would highly recommend you read because it's a really personal and cool story about his struggles after Order 66. But yeah, that is a little, it's kind of like him calling, or her calling him honey or babe or something like that. That she called him Ben, and that's why he goes by Ben as his alias in the latter days following kind of when he's trying to live undercover. But I just thought that was an interesting thing. But once again, sorry that the podcast has been kind of everywhere recently. I'm going to get her back on track. Starting this Friday, we're going to have 2 episodes coming out for episode 1 and 2. I'm super, super excited. It's going to be very tiring, but I'm pumped. Stay tuned. We're getting 2 episodes, guys. I don't think y'all understand how excited I am. We're getting 2 Kenobi episodes in one day, and then we're getting another one next Wednesday. So it's going to be really, really fast, quick turnarounds, but it's going to be awesome, and I can't wait to experience it with y'all. With that said, this episode's gone on long enough, and I'm sorry that y'all had to listen to my nasally voice for this long. So, that said, you're taking your first steps into a larger world. May the Force be with you, and I'll see y'all in the next episode. Bye, friends.